Okay, Cold War Part 2. Looking at the Iron Curtain, the concept of the Iron Curtain. This is when Europe becomes divided along that line that you saw in the last slide, where everything in the West are the free democratic countries that were liberated by the United States and the rest of the Allies during World War II, and those on the East side are all of the ones that became communist nations because they were liberated from the Nazis by the Soviets after World War II. So we had the Soviets creating international organizations to try and coordinate all of their communist activities across the world, and this was called Cominform. And the term Iron Curtain is one that we actually get from the person who was the leader of England for most of World War II, and then again he was reelected after being voted out of office at the end of World War II. But during his second term, he created the term Iron Curtain as the idea of there being a massive impenetrable barriers separating the democratic and communist areas of Europe, and you can see that illustrated here on the bottom on the right. Um, and again, Cold War is just the term that we use. That's a definition for the 46 years of tension between the United States and Soviet Union. Not an actual war, not a fighting war between those two countries, but a series of significant tensions that was then fought by proxy in a lot of other places around the world. Now, the idea of containment, that was an American idea that since we've already lost Eastern Europe to communism, you can see there in that cartoon that we illustrate Mr. Stalin or satirize Mr. Stalin as grabbing all of these places, greedily swallowing up as much land in as many countries as he could. But since we've already lost those countries, the idea is we don't want to lose any more. And so to prevent other people from gaining more countries, we wanted to keep them from spreading. And if we self-contain them, if they're not able to gain more countries, then the idea was they would eventually just collapse and fall apart. And so what we did to sort of do to carry that out was called the Truman Doctrine. And we can see here, because there are only two major world powers after World War II, it would have been the United States and the Soviet Union. Um, we are the only ones that aren't trying to swallow up countries and make them communist. So it's our job to allow, in Mr. Truman's own words, assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own way. Now, that a lot of times meant choosing for them to not let them become communist, but that was the goal, is again to keep them from becoming communist. And so we put our money where our mouth was. $400 billion into Turkey and Greece to keep out Soviet influence. We gave it to various factions within those countries to prevent them from joining the Soviet Union, essentially. And another way that we worked on the Truman Doctrine, another major aspect of the Truman Doctrine, was the Marshall Plan. And this is a very important concept in European history because we looked at what had happened at the end of World War I and realized that having punished Germany so severely for their actions during the First World War and forcing them to take on mountains of debt in order to pay back the damages, that had a lot to do with creating the conditions that led to World War II. So we want to avoid that from happening again. And in order to avoid that, what we're going to do is not just not just tell them we don't want them to become communist and tell them that we want them to develop a society that is similar to ours. We want to help them do that because, again, Europe has been flattened basically by World War II. There are millions upon millions upon millions of people who are homeless, and you can see here in France, a fifth of all homes, one out of every five houses or apartment buildings in France was leveled by the war because that's where so much of the fighting took place. And so they literally don't have an infrastructure or a society to build on and to completely redevelop their entire culture. And so we said to them, "Hey, what can we do to help you?" And their response was, "Give us money." And so what we did is, in order to again give them the ability to create a democratic society based on market capitalism, which was our economic form, we gave them $13 billion over the course of several years to rebuild their country, which translates to trillions of dollars in today's money, which helped them recover. And we will continue with this in part 3.